Aloha! Aloha! Yes. And this is Dr. Serge King. I'm saying that for the benefit of the tape. Talking about Huna. And tonight we're going to talk about nature spirits. And how that relates to Huna and how that relates to this whole concept of very special kind of shamanism that we teach and that we talk about. Okay? And this is a subject that we haven't really worked with or haven't really dealt with much before. This concept that one of the ideas in this Hawaiian shamanism is that everything is alive, responsive, and aware. Everything whatsoever. Of course, that would also apply to the chair you're sitting in, as well as the ceilings and the walls and everything else. But one way to deal with that in a very effective way is to deal with that in nature. And to deal with that in a way that we can talk about as nature spirits. There are two concepts in Hawaiian that could be interpreted as nature spirits that would deal with that. One of them is, I'll put some of these down, akua. Akua is a Hawaiian word often mistranslated as God, okay, or even goddess or something like that. And that's not what it really means. The real meaning in Hawaiian is concept, okay, almost like thought. And sometimes it might be something like a thought form, but it's more of a concept. It's spirit in a way, but it's intelligent spirit. But it isn't, the Hawaiians never thought of it as a concept of God or goddess or anything like that. Unless you want to think of it as the individual spirit of an individual, let's talk about nature, an individual animal or an individual plant as being the god of that plant. I mean, you can use the word that way if you want to. But usually in the Western terms, when we're using the word God, we think of something far, far greater than that. And akua didn't really mean that in Hawaiian. The closest thing would be the individual spirit of something, okay? And like a plant or like an animal. The concept here is that those things are alive and responsive. Old buddy, how you doing? And that we can communicate with them, and they do communicate with us. They do communicate with us. We don't know it, don't realize it sometimes, but they are alive and they are responsive to us and how we feel and what our emotions are. Not just the plants, but the very earth itself is responsive to us. Okay? And if we can learn how to attune ourselves more to nature and to the things in nature, then we can have a greater cooperation on this planet. And the old idea that some of the peoples have talked about, American Indians and others, of walking lightly on the earth, which is an American Indian phrase, and this whole idea of loving the mother earth and that kind of a thing, has also to do with being able to get in tune with it to the degree that you can communicate with it, and it can communicate with you, both ways. Both ways are important. Okay? That it can communicate with you. There was, I'm reminded of a statement in Shakespeare. It's important because it's easy for us to communicate with plants. You can say, "Hi, plant," and anybody can do that. In Shakespeare, there was a statement, I think it was Henry the Sixth or something like that. Whatever it was, where the guy was called Hal, and the one that Falstaff was in. I don't recall that exactly. But there was a statement where a magician came up and he said, trying to be very impressive, said, "I can call spirits from the vasty deep." And Hal said, "Well, so can I, and so can any man, but will they come when you call them?" Okay? And that has to do with the communication going both ways. Okay? Anybody can talk to a plant. Will the plant listen? Will it respond? Or an animal or something like that. Yes, it will always respond. Not always in the way you want it to. That depends on how you talk to it, and that depends on whether you're able to get in tune with it. And it becomes more and more important as this earth progresses and the way we progress with it, especially technologically, that we learn to cooperate, that we learn to make that attunement and cooperate with the earth. Not just be aware of it, but cooperate with it. It has an awful lot to teach us. If we treat these as beings with awareness and life, with things to teach us, boy, we can go so far. So much farther than we can go or do on our own. If we start treating them as living beings, sharing the planet with us. And this is the Hawaiian concept. living beings sharing the planet with us. We look at plants in particular, but all of these kinds of things, and animals as well. Talk those, and rocks too, if we want to get to that. But all of these in this concept, they have akuas, which is the spirit of the. Let's talk about plants, which is the spirit of the plant, okay? Which is the living, intelligent essence of it. The same way as we might talk about the spirit of a human being as being different from the body, not apart from or separate from, but different than. It's the guiding force of the body. Well, the plants have that kind of spirit too. People have claimed at various times to see nature spirits. And very often when they see these nature spirits, they appear as, little dancing elves, or miniature human beings of some kind very often. Okay? And from the Huna understanding, what's happening there is not that the spirit of the plant actually looks like that. The spirit of the plant obviously looks like the plant. Okay? But that the subconscious mind of the person who's perceiving it translates the communication into an understandable form. And so that's why it may appear in human form, okay, to the person who's perceiving it. Sometimes the American Indians, when they are doing some of their rituals using perhaps peyote or perhaps not, will tune into an animal spirit, which may be their guide or their ally. It will be very plant-like, at the same time have a more or less human form, which is a way of easing the communication, okay? Because a lot of human beings have the idea that it's easier to talk to human beings than it is to something with a stem and leaves, okay? But even there, in those cases, it isn't that the spirit actually looks like that, because that's what a lot of people get mixed up when they try to communicate with the plant spirits, for instance. Because they try to meditate or go into a special state or try to look around in the woods for these little things that other people have seen and described. When all those little things is that individual's way, or in some cases, if there's a cultural backing for it, a whole tribe or clan or people's way of perceiving the spirit of that plant or the spirit of that area. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay. So there is the concept, and you can, however you perceive that. If it appears to you as a bright light, if it appears to you as a little elf sitting on one of the leaves, if it appears to you in the same form as it appears here, that's not what is important. It is not the appearance that's important. Your subconscious can help you conceive of any kind of appearance that will help. What's important is the actual sense of communication and the recognition of the response. Because there is a response. If you pay attention, there's a response. We just had a training recently in Hawaii. Oh, boy. And at this training on Oahu, during part of the process, people they had something to do, which was to get in touch with energy fields. And in part of the process, several people went over to quite a large, I don't think it was a rubber tree plant, but it was a large plant in a corner, quite a large one. And as they stood around it and they were building up their energy and sending the energy there, the whole plant began quivering. And the leaves all shook and the plant all quivered, and like it was responding, it was moving. Nobody was touching it. Nobody was jumping up and down, and nobody was blowing on it. It was a big plant. It had leaves at least as heavy as this. And yet, when they stopped and when they broke apart their circle and backed off and blessed the plant and everything, then the plant settled down and the leaves stopped moving. And by the time they called me over to look at it, just a few leaves were just barely moving and the thing slowed down and stopped. Okay? But what was happening there was they were building up quite a bit of human energy. Sometimes we can call it bioenergy if you like, or ki, whatever. And they were building up enough of that so that the plant felt that. The plant really responded to that. And responded in a physical, visible way. Now other times plants respond to this. The spirit of the plant is what responds. Because people are able to, a number of things you can do, but it's possible to build up your energy in your hands and put it over some seeds and imagine that energy is flowing into those seeds, let's say, and then sprout them, or when they're starting to sprout, and you'll get, if you're doing it with love and you don't do it too much, you'll get healthier, brighter, more alive plants. Okay? They'll be bigger, they'll be maybe bushier or something like that. And it's partly the energy, but it's a lot has to do with the love. A lot has to do with the love. Because that kind of attention is a form of love. And when you give that kind of attention to the plants, the spirit in the plant is what responds to that. It's not just the human beings that respond to love. The plants actually do. When we have a loving intent, our energy field changes. Okay? It becomes healthier, not only to us, but to everybody around us. The plants respond to that beautifully and strongly. Okay? And so when you have that kind of intent, if you are trying to do it with just pure raw energy to energize the plant, then sometimes that's too much. I made that mistake myself once. Okay? I thought I had a rubber tree plant, and let's see, it was about 1.5 feet high, and it was beautiful, looked nice, and had the beginnings of a growth on the top of it, something a little bigger than this one, but it hadn't been growing, A week or so went by, nothing was happening, it was just sitting there nice and green, and no growth. I said, okay, I'm going to help this out. I did not communicate with the plant. I have to admit, this was one of my learning lessons. And at that time, I was just going for pure energy. So I built up a lot of what we call mana. I built up a lot of mana, a lot of energy, and zapped the plant. Boy, I was going to imagine that thing was going to be growing and sprouting the next day. The next day, what happened was the tip of that plant started to shrivel. And the day after that, it shriveled a little more, and then the top leaves fell off, and the thing turned brown, and I had virtually killed that plant by trying to give it too much energy. Okay? It was doing fine. It was holding its own. And if I'd come in with love and sat there and talked to that plant with love, then it would have responded, and then it would have grown. But instead, I thought I was just going to come in with pure energy and treating it almost mechanically, not communicating with the spirit of it, but treating it almost mechanically. And when I did that, the thing just shriveled up. It was overdosed. Okay? Human beings can do that too, in the same kind of a way. We can give a person a little bit of love and they can blossom, and we try and just give them a lot of energy if we're approaching it from just that pure, and we'll get them all wired. Okay? And they may not be necessarily a healthy state whatsoever, or a little bit of love might have enabled them to break loose and grow for themselves. Okay? But plants are sensitive to that. Sensitive to the intent. I don't have the, let's see, I have one of the devices in the office, but I have a very strange device that spins differently. If you spin it one way, it spins real fine. If you spin it the other way, it wobbles. And it isn't supposed to do that. And I had a friend of mine recently cut a branch from a tree, a pecan tree in Texas. And so he was making some of these, and he was finding it very difficult, wasn't sure why. Sometimes they would work and sometimes they wouldn't. And so he made a few that worked in the same way. It looks kind of like a boat. I won't go into all of that right now. But when he spun it one way, it would do the same kind of thing. But then he made one that did it the opposite way. Now, I've seen a lot of these devices. And for the first time, I saw one that didn't spin like it was supposed to. I mean, they're not supposed to even spin the other way, but nevertheless didn't spin like any of the others did. And it was the opposite way, from the same branch. And we couldn't figure that out, what was happening, so I just recently asked him to make me another one from the same branch so I could test that and have two of them out of wood, out of the same tree. And he just sent it to me, and he sent me a very interesting note along with it. He said, what I found out in the course of making these was that everything, the whole outcome of this thing depended on what I was thinking, on my mood, on what I thought of the wood as I was working with it. If I didn't have the right mood, he said, I could make the thing in the identical shape and nothing would happen. He said, if ones that I made, it had to be a loving, attentive, caring attitude in order to make that thing work. Now that gets us even farther beyond ordinary physics than we thought we were, because we thought that you just put the right shape and the thing would happen. And he said, that's not what takes place. The wood is responsive, very strongly responsive to the attitude of the woodworker, okay? Especially in this kind of an energy reaction from the wood. Okay? So it was very unusual and very, very instructive. Even the things that we make have akuas, have an essential spirit and respond to us as well. Now, when we talk about plants. Of course, animals, since they move around and they can usually make noises, we seem sometimes to feel a little bit closer to them than we do to plants. And of course, we know that they respond. But even there, people too often try to act with animals as if they're just, almost like mechanical devices. And yet, over and over again, the very best animal trainers have found that the very best reactions come when there's love, when there is a loving intent, when there is a loving treatment, when there is a caring attitude. Then the animals respond wonderfully, almost as if they were children. The same kind of thing happens with children. There's a spirit more obvious in the animals, but it is obvious in the plants as well. And less obvious, but still there, in the rocks, in the same way. Okay? And rocks will respond a lot better to you if you do anything with rocks. If you have rocks on your land, if you're trying to build a fence, if you are using rocks in whatever way, or if you work with crystals especially, wow, there is a spirit in each one of those little things. And you break it in two and you got two spirits. Okay? And you got a whole grain, every grain of sand has one too. Everything that can be identified as an individual entity has an akua and can be communicated with. And we'll talk a little bit about how to get that communication back. But we'll respond to you. We'll respond to you. This may sound a little silly, but if you are walking across a hot sand beach, and you talk to the sand first, and you ask it to cool down for you and be nice to you, and you give it a lot of compliments, you realize that sand will not be as hot. Now, I challenge you to try that. Okay? But you'll find that even in that way, you'll get a different response from the sand in walking across, because the world does respond to us. Now, it isn't just the individual little things, but it is the grouping of things as well. And the Hawaiians had a word for that, too. The kind of, if you like, the group spirit, which was called aumakua. Human beings are considered to have, each one of us individually, an aumakua, because we are a multi-dimensional, complex conglomeration, okay, each one of us. But when we're talking about aumakuas in the plant world, for instance, there would be an aumakua of all rubber trees, as an example. An aumakua of all particular species, as we would define individual groups. From the Hawaiian system, they would be considered to have an aumakua. Would be a kind of like the group spirit of that. But also areas. You can get in touch with not just individual plants or animals, but you can get in touch with the spirit of a valley, or the spirit of a mountain, and that which would include everything on the mountain. Okay? Los Angeles Basin has an aumakua. Okay? And the Chumash Indians would understand that and be able to communicate with different valleys and different mountains and different hills and things like that. And because they felt that they were living, aware, responsive beings, which were part of the intelligent essence there. Okay? And among the Hawaiians, it was very common practice to, when you went into a valley, to acknowledge the aumakua of the valley, and just acknowledge it, because acknowledgement is a form of love. It didn't have to be real formal. Sometimes you could say a real formal acknowledgement, like you might do at a formal party that you might go to. Sometimes you could just say, "Hi, how you doing, Valley?" Okay? Yet there would be an acknowledgement, and the moment you have that kind of loving intent, there is a flow back. And if you are aware, if you allow yourself to be aware enough, you can feel that. There's an actual feeling sensation that your body can pick up. And it feels good. It's the feeling you get when somebody likes you. Okay? Sometimes you come into a place, maybe where there's been injury, maybe where there's been, because everything that's alive, responsive, and aware also has memory. And so sometimes there may have been tragedy, and sometimes there may have been just harm of some kinds. And you can go into a place and start to tune in and feel a sense of pain. That's how we translate it. Okay? And discomfort in which case it takes a little bit more than high. It might take a little bit more caring, consideration, imagining peace, doing things like that until the area settles down, feels cleared, and feels more welcoming. The communication from our side is very simple. It's intent. You can speak words, or you can give images. If you're walking into, let's say you're walking into, for instance, walking up to this plant, I can either say, "Hi, plant," or I can make an imaginary image of the plant being happy, okay, to whatever that comes up in my mind, okay, whether that's flowers on the plant or the plant just jumping around like that. If I make an image in my mind of that, that's carrying my intent. It works the same way with plants like that as it would with animals. If you're walking along and you've got a barking dog, some dogs which are trained to be very protective and very barking and stuff like that, one very effective way to deal with them is to imagine them being petted by their owner and being scratched and petted and played with. And if you're able to focus on that clearly enough, the dog will settle down. He'll get the message. So it isn't always by words that we have to speak. Okay? Images also give very powerful messages. Okay? And so we just have that image in our mind with the intent that it be received by whoever we're directing it to, whatever we're directing it to, and it will be received that way. Now, the feedback is very simple. The feedback comes simply by being aware of your body. Is where you get the best kind of feedback. Sure, it's possible to get a kind of an image feedback. Some people are sensitive enough to get that. Some people will even get the idea of a voice coming from it, and that's good if you can do that. But the most sure kind of response is one that you get through your tactile sense, through your body sense, because that's the closest connection you have to the very earth itself. Okay? That is your real body sense. And so if you can feel any kind of pleasant feeling or movement or something like that in your body, that is a response. Now if you start coming in with the intellect and saying, well, am I just making that up? I have to come back with a shaman reply and say, yes, of course, you're making everything up. Okay? The whole thing, everything. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether you're making that particular thing up or not. Yes, of course you are. You start doubting and you're going to start cutting yourself off from the communication. You're going to open yourself up to a far richer life around you. When you start making this kind of communication, being aware of your body and its responses when you do that kind of a thing, and realize, is the most wonderful, marvelous thing about it at all, realize you are never, ever alone. Realize what an incredible feeling that is, to realize no matter where you are, whether there's a human being around you or not, there are alive, responsive creatures around who can love you. And you're never alone. It's not the same thing as having a human being there to touch, granted. Okay? But the love is there if you open yourself up to it and you allow yourself to sense it. Okay? And there's a deep feeling about that, and it's a powerful feeling, and you begin to get connected to this wonderful earth that we are also a product of. Okay? We are spiritual and earthly, both, and they don't have to conflict. Okay? It's this marvelous cooperation that occurs. But when you start tuning in like that, you get more and more aware of your body sense and your body response. That's the beautiful thing. You are loved. You are never alone. Let's have a little bit of an experience with that for a few moments. Why don't you take a deep breath. Let your eyes close. And just, you can make these statements and you can make them with images too if you want to, but just be aware of this. Be aware of both the plants in the room. Be aware of the earth that you live on. And just start thinking this. The earth loves me. The plants in this room, all these plants in this room, they love me. send out love and good feeling to them, but they love me. The trees outside love me. This whole basin, this whole valley here, it loves me. The mountains that surround it, with their forests and their streams, and all their flowers and their animals, they love me. And the ocean loves me. All that vast ocean, all up and down the coast and across. The ocean loves me. The birds, flying on the beaches, the ones in the trees, flying through the air, they love me. And the air itself and the wind, it loves me. The clouds love me. And the stars I can see out there at night. All those stars, and the moon itself too, they love me. And this whole marvelous, magnificent, wonderful universe that I live in, it loves me. I give it love too, and it loves me. It loves me. Enjoy that. When you're ready, come on back out. Nice deep breath. And aloha. Mahalo.